On today's episode of Locked On Wild, the Darby Hendrickson era is over. Who's next as an assistant on John Hynes' staff?
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome in to another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube or your favorite podcast platforms, wherever you tune in, whether it be on your phone, in the car, on the go, or at home on the couch. We appreciate you tuning in to Locked On Wild every single day of the week. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you today by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, Alex Micheletti joins us as we dive into the big news from over the weekend as Darby Hendrickson was relieved of his duties as assistant coach for the Minnesota Wild. We'll talk about the leader in the clubhouse as a potential replacement for Darby, and we will also take a look at the Stanley Cup Final, which is set finally for both the Eastern and Western Conference. So we'll talk about that as we dive into today's episode. My name is Seth Topal, host of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild insider. And joining us as he does each and every week is Alex Micheletti. And Alex, we'll talk about the Stanley Cup Final to finish the show today, but it seems like it always works out that there is just some sort of Minnesota Wild news that is either released on a Friday afternoon or some point during the weekend, which means that we then get the opportunity to break it down here to start the week. And a shocker from Friday afternoon is Darby Hendrickson was relieved of his duties after 14 years as a member of the Minnesota Wild coaching staff. Multiple coaching tenures. The only coach that he was not part of the staff with was Jacques Lemaire, who he played for. And so a lot of ties through the organization. And I think the thing that was most interesting to me is from what Michael Russo was saying, this was not a John Hynes decision. This is a Bill Guerin decision to make this move and to take the lone mainstay off the coaching staff. But honestly, not a huge surprise because John Hynes is going to want to get some people on the staff that he is more familiar with. And I think a lot of people have just been wondering kind of over the years is like, what was Darby doing to put himself in position to last all of these different coaching changes?
Yeah, it seemed like he was just kind of the middleman of, player to head coach. It seemed like he was beloved by, all the players. So the timing was just, it was shocking because Darby's family's foundation had the hockey tournament over the weekend. And you saw on the Wild social pages that they showed up there, which is that's a ballsy move to do that. After you fire the person that's in charge of that foundation. It really stinks. His son Beckett is going to be a freshman at the University of Minnesota, so he's his son was playing junior hockey in Sioux Falls, and so now he's here in the Twins, back home in the Twin Cities, and then his dad gets let go. So that's really unfortunate for sure.
Yeah, and I really don't know like what comes next for a guy like Darby Hendrickson, who obviously, you know, he did fill a few roles, was in charge of the defense for one, but you know, was somebody who, as a player, could kind of bridge that gap. There was that big moment later in the year in which he spent, I think it was almost a half hour, talking to Marcus Johansson and Freddie Gaudreau, just trying to kind of figure some things out. And so
he was a vibes guy, as we always talk about.
There was a lot of that going on over the years, but at the same time, like, as this team continues to kind of start to feel the pressure of trying to get everything lined up for Kirill Kaprizov,
they're finding fall guys. He was the fall guy, and it's really unfortunate. But you know, I think if Dean gets hired anywhere, you know, if it's AHL or NHL, he's going to call Darby. It just seems like he is a Dino guy. So I think that's what he'll do is, you know, he'll lay low. And, you know, he's a classy guy. I don't think he's going to say much until way later, unless, you know, if he goes on a podcast at some point. But I think he's going to take the high road and then wait for Dean to, you know, to land somewhere. And, you know, Dean's going to hire him for sure.
Yeah, that's a great call. It's a great spot to kind of land in all this. So he'll probably just kind of hang out like Dean has, because there's potential that there will be some team next season during the year that'll come knocking for somebody that's got some head coaching experience, and Dean will probably want to bring his guys with. So that's a great, I think that's a very astute observation on a couple of fronts, because, you know, you hit the nail on the head, is that I don't think letting Darby go is going to fix it. This is not going to fix the crux of the problems, and it is just continuing to try to make changes for the sake of making changes, because at the end of the day, this is Bill Guerin was not going to do anything to remove John Hynes, and Craig Leopold's not going to do anything to remove Bill Guerin. So, like, those chairs are firmly planted to the deck of the ship. You only have a few that you can, can make changes on. And honestly, like, I'm a little intrigued as to what this means for the rest of the coaching staff. Like, it seems like at this point, Jason King is going to stay on, and Patrick Dwyer, who came in to oversee the penalty kill, seems like he's going to stick as well, and that there is going to be one assistant spot, which we have heard some rumblings as to where that direction is going, and we'll talk about that next segment. But minus making one coaching change, you're running it back again.
Yeah, and that's what it just makes me, you know, continue to think on the Marco Rossi front. You know, we really don't want to see him go, but you take a look. It seems like this team is setting up, you know, itself to go big game hunting next summer. And so what do you do with Marco Rossi in that situation? Because if you're trying to get a free agent center, where are you going to, you know, you're going to have to put him in a spot, and Marco, you know, he doesn't really fit on a third or fourth line.
Yeah.
So that's why he is, you know, a valuable asset doesn't have a no trade clause, which, you know, Bill Guerin locked himself in with pretty much every veteran that you wish he could offload. But it's poor Marco because he doesn't have that safety net right now. And so you're looking at him. you're looking at Philip Gustafsson, that there's questions that continue to linger on him with fitness. Is he ever going to be able to be fully capable of being that 1A goaltender? You have Jesper in the wings, and so it's going to be an intriguing couple weeks here, and there's definitely going to be some action in Vegas. So buckle up. It's going to get really interesting because I mean there's some heavy hitters next summer for sure, and so it looks like Bill Guerin is getting that in full motion here. So we'll see if those moves at the Sphere indicate anything for are they gonna. You don't want them to punt next year, but we'll see if that gives any indication. But then you have, Craig Leopold too, that is furious that he's missing out on this playoff money. So this team will never be boring. That's for sure.
And here's how there are a few ways to kind of gaze into the looking glass to see how this goes. Our run it back is going to frustrate the fans, and rightfully so. And it's going to make it that much more likely that you miss the playoffs for a second consecutive season. And so, I just envision this scenario in which Bill Guerin is kind of backing up and is just feeling for like the ledge or the back wall of the corner. It's going to get to the end of the season next year. If this is just how this is going to play out without a ton of development, you're going to start to feel that wall behind you. And that's then where this is now I've got to do something to save my job or go down swinging. But I don't know. It is interesting because there would have been hope, I think, that this would have led to maybe let's get an up-and-comer on the staff. Let's try to kind of position ourselves for the, potential what comes next. Look to the future. That's all people are asking for. Wait till you hear the name that is most likely going to be the next assistant for the Minnesota Wild. We'll tell you about it after we continue today's episode of Locked on Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked on Wild is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked on Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Double dip for you on this Tuesday as Alexis Pearson will be joining us to recap the Walter Cup Championship season for the PWHL Minnesota. So we'll talk about that as well as some of the changes that we can expect from the PW for next season and beyond. So a little bonus episode for you coming up later today. Make sure to look for it wherever you get your podcasts. Alex, we left quite the cliffhanger for the listeners before the break because we were talking about the preferred route to go for the vacant assistant coach spot. And it's not set in stone as of yet. But tweet from Michael Russo over the weekend. With the Minnesota Wild in the market for an assistant coach, well-respected longtime coach Jack Capuano, whose contract wasn't renewed as Ottawa associate coach, is likely one top contender. Long history with John Hynes, ran Senators practices after DJ Smith was fired, and coached their defense. I got to laugh. The first comment after that was thoughts on Mike Yeo. And we talked about this a few weeks ago, Alex. Russo responds with, he's got a job already, just not announced. Like, Mike Yeo just finds a way to just latch on to another coaching staff.
Yeah, it's probably in Canada, so he's probably just continuing on to another Canadian province.
The Locked On Senators boys responded sometime later with Sens, so maybe there, but Mike Yeo's got a job already lined up and ready to rock.
Hope he can turn around that Sens defense.
Well, so Capuano, let's talk about this. So for his playing career, he's 57 right now. Was drafted by the Toronto Maple Leafs 88th overall in round 5 in the 1984 entry draft. Got 6 games at the NHL level, but did have a 20-goal season with the Milwaukee Admirals. Had a 50-point year that year. So not a ton in the way of experience. He played from 1988-89 to 1991-92. But his coaching career has spanned quite a few years. He started with the Tallahassee Tiger Sharks, then the Knoxville Cherokees in the ECHL, the PD Pride, up until 2000, 2001. Then hopped on with the New York Islanders in 2005, 2006 as an assistant. The Bridgeport Sound Tigers, the AHL, was an assistant there, then promoted to head coach at Bridgeport for 4 seasons. Then he was a head coach with the New York Islanders from 2010, 2011 to 2016, 2017. Then an associate head coach with the Florida Panthers for 2 years, and has spent the last 5 seasons as associate head coach for the Ottawa Senators. Has advanced as an assistant, has advanced out of the first round 1 time, has made the playoffs 3 times. And I'm the Ottawa Senators defensively
and goaltending, but I mean, it's been a train wreck there. That's what's been holding them back. I don't understand that. And they've coached on national teams together too. And it was a train wreck this past summer. I don't understand it. It's kind of the opposite of what we talked about before the break too, an up and comer, but he is not an up and comer, and it didn't go well with the Islanders either. So for a team that's missed the playoffs, why would you want to bring in something, a guy that got let go by Ottawa, whose team missed the playoffs because of their defense? And look at some of the defensemen that they have.
Plenty of talent.
Yeah.
Plenty of talent on D. Here's my thought, and comment section, if I'm wrong on this, let it fly. My thoughts are, even if it's a coach who has a extensive AHL postseason history, that's one thing where, hey, we're bringing in the head coach of the Chicago Wolves, who they've obviously had a ton of success, or some similar team like that. We're going to poach somebody from somebody else's system who has playoff pedigree to be able to come in and kind of try to impart some of that on the younger players as they continue to fill the roster. But it just again, I think it's just kind of adding another member to the crew.
It's frustrating. It's frustrating. It's like they're on the brink of a really an interesting transition here, and this is the route that they want to go. It's it doesn't make much sense, and I mean you're locking in people that haven't had a lot of postseason success, and it's not just 1 or 2 years. With Hynes, it's 3 years, and I mean, what are we doing here? There's just doesn't there on the staff there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of winning, and where is that supposed to be coming from? And you're the leadership group.
In a weird sense, I don't know why this popped into my head, but it almost feels as though like this group is trying to set something up for the next job. Like, am I crazy that it seems like this band, Bill Guerin, John Hynes, they're getting everything set up for whatever the next job after this is, because I don't know, maybe there's a prevailing sense behind the scenes that Kirill's just not going to re-up.
Well, what scares me too is we have new assistant GMs that haven't been assistant GMs before, or any type of like that next step leadership. That's kind of that scares me big time.
And even that, like, even those guys have been around the organization enough to where you can point to kind of the reward those within for doing a good job and kind of working their way up through the system. But it's just, I don't know, like it just,
people are getting locked into spots that, it just seems rushed. We have odd timings for firing and trying to do a Friday news dump when there isn't a whole lot going on. And I just don't understand that this was the time to do that now. It's really, really, really strange.
It is just like, I have a lot of questions on this, and I don't know how to vocalize them at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Because
you can't tell me the players like this, so that's going to cause more friction, no doubt about it.
Like, what happens? So hear me out on this. What happens if everything just goes completely south and they start the season like they did last year, where you're like 5-14-1? What are you going to do?
Right.
Like,
and you can't tell me you hear him saying that there's going to be a 3 goalie or could be a 3 goalie rotation. That just never works. It's like saying that you have, when they say you have 2 quarterbacks, but then you have none really.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't see a 3 goalie rotation working. And you don't want to put Jesper back in Iowa because they are a train wreck. And I don't see them getting much better, not at this point. So you're going to throw them back in to just be fed by the Wolves down there. That makes zero sense. And so you have to dangle Gustafson. You have to do it.
Yeah.
And all these people are saying you'd be giving up on him too early. Well, why did you draft Jesper then?
Right.
It just, with where the Iowa team is, it's just not good for him right now.
There has been so much that has happened in the last even calendar year.
It's crazy.
It just is just odd.
O'Hearn, Height. I mean, those are two really
Integral
important
guys.
Yeah. Important. I mean, Height did everything travel. I mean, I don't even know who's doing that right now. I don't know. They haven't said, they didn't announce that at all. So that's important. I mean, they do stuff months in advance. So that that's mind boggling. And I don't know what they're going to do with that. And, you know, to have multiple internal investigations of your front office, there's a lot of healing that needs to be done in that department for sure.
Trav is just screaming into his phone or his radio, however he's listening. It's all about self-preservation at this point. He's not wrong, but I'm gonna have to get like the red yarn in my apartment and start to try to just plot out what is going on, because it's just a lot of things that are happening around this team that are just, I don't know. Vibes are not what I would call great at this point.
And you mentioned it too. Look, I mean, the division is not getting older, it's getting younger, and they're getting fast. And the Wild are getting older or keeping guys locked in. And so you think the Foligno contract is going to age well? You know, I mean, Zuccarello's a year older. Spurgeon, that one's not going to age well at all. He continues to get, you know, beat up, and you know he's a warrior, but you're paying him a lot of money to not be on the power play.
Yeah,
and so that you know that's really tough. And then I mean, you got guys like Marcus Johansson that they can play freely this year because they know he's not going to get bought out. So he's destined for another top 6 role, which is going to be mind boggling unless they can create, you know, more space by trading Gustafsson. But if they keep Gustafsson, there isn't a whole lot that they can do to add, and it's not going to be a top 6 then. So, you know, where's the goal scoring going to come from? You know, you can't just rely on Kirill. You need Boldy, but you need Zuccarello. You need Zuccarello to be a lot better than he was this year because they're paying him a ton of money, and he didn't shoot the puck enough. I don't know if it was confidence or injuries, but they need him to be the player that they sign. You know, the money that they gave him, and it's been way too inconsistent for sure.
Bill Guerin needs to take a page out of Zito's book down in Florida. I believe his name is also Bill.
Yes.
Bill Zito.
Yeah.
General manager of the year, and has been in the top. He's been a finalist like 4 years in a row.
It's amazing. They just they go for it in playoffs, but you know, they sign guys to just, you know, really smart deals too.
Yeah.
The Gustav Forsling, I mean, yeah, bring that contract up for me if you can. But it's just watching that guy play, it's amazing because, you know, he's not really a power play guy for them, but he just does everything efficiently. And you know, it just, they got him just at the perfect amount. And
$5.75 million until 2031, 2032.
It's the steal, you know, it's one of the best overall contracts going for sure in the Eastern Conference and probably the league. And he'll be tasked with trying to shut down McDavid for sure.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the Stanley Cup Final, because we can go down the entire Florida Panthers roster, because they were in an interesting situation a couple of years ago when Matthew Tkachuk decided he didn't want to stick around in Calgary. Guess who was there to make a massive swing that worked out completely in Florida's favor and absolutely not in Calgary's? We'll talk about that, as well as the Stanley Cup Final, to finish today's episode of Locked on Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. Folks, it is winner take all time in the NBA and the NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. My advice here would be to take a look at the Major League Baseball slate and pick either the Chicago White Sox or the Colorado Rockies. Whoever they're playing, take the over or the other team to outright win. That then will give you those $150 in bonus bets to bet on either the NBA Finals or the Stanley Cup Final. Whether you have a particular team you are interested in betting on, FanDuel can help make it happen. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. One final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Short segment to finish the show today, Alex. Florida Panthers had a decision to make a couple of years ago. Matthew Tkachuk was not happy in Calgary, was not going to re-up there. Florida Panthers had a guy in Jonathan Huberdeau who had just put up like a 115-point season. I'm here to tell you, your undoing as a general manager, falling in love with your roster. Like, falling too far into, this is what is going to get it done for me. Look at this. Matthew Tkachuk acquired via trade by the Panthers. Sam Bennett acquired via trade by the Florida Panthers.
Sam Bennett was also playing in Calgary.
Sam Reinhart acquired via trade by the Florida Panthers. I mean, you can go up and down the lineup. Brandon Montour acquired via trade by the Florida Panthers. The only guy in which is anchoring their decor that was actually drafted is Aaron Ekblad. The other defensive players, waiver claim, standard signing, waiver claim, standard signing, and a trade. On the roster,
freaking Dmitry Kulikov.
still finding a way to get it done. On the roster, Alexander Barkov was the second overall pick in 2013. Hey, what have we been talking about for a long time is, like, if you want to get really, really good players, you got to commit to getting them. He was a draft pick. Anton Lindell was the 12th overall pick in 2020. Beyond that, signings and trades. Bill Zito sees his roster, and Tarasenko always has the mentality of, hey, this team is good, but it can be better. If you allow yourself to get, like, I've built a good team, I can rest back on my laurels. That is what leads to you being pulled out of a job.
Yeah. And we can look at that trade with Calgary. Look what happened with, when Brad Treliving was the Calgary general manager at the time. I mean, he made that move. They lost Gaudreau to Columbus of all places. And so, they made that deal. It broke up one of the best lines in hockey with Tkachuk, Gaudreau, and Elias Lindholm. And then Lindholm was with Huberdeau, and it was a complete disaster. And it worked out in Florida's favor. It's just it changed both franchises for the next decade. It's incredible. You take a look at Bill Zito. he picks up a guy like Kyle Capuano. Now it's not going to move the needle a whole lot, but he was the captain in Buffalo for a long time. And you get a guy like that and, in the room, it's a huge deal. He might be in and out of the lineup, but it's just moves like that too, that, go so underrated. And, it would be really cool to see the former Gopher, St. Paul native, get a Stanley Cup and bring it back home. That'd be really cool for sure.
You look at it on the Edmonton side too.
Yeah.
Connor McDavid, first overall pick in 2015. Leon Draisaitl, third overall pick in 2014. Even Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, who had he fell off this year, had a 100-point season last year with 37 goals. He was a number 1 overall pick in 2011. Then you bring in a guy like Zach Hyman who had 50 goals this year. Like, you can't become fixated on a roster. You have to be willing to quickly pivot. You have to be willing to move something that you may view as a pretty important piece for something that could be an upgrade.
Yep.
Like,
you only have these short windows, and Edmonton had to make some moves to, because they know Leon Draisaitl's up next summer, and so you got to start winning. They I think one of their most important moves that they made was getting Matthias Ekholm from Nashville. That they needed a top 4 D man, and that was such a big move for them. And they got Tyson Barrie out of there, who was just a grenade in that lineup. He was, Edmonton fans were just so sick of him, and so that was I don't know what Nashville was thinking, getting him. Andrew Burnett did not like him playing him, so that was a home run move by Ken Holland. You take a look, getting guys like, Evander Kane was, he causes issues, but, he plays an important role on that team. It's just, they weren't afraid to make big moves, they know this window's open for McDavid, and, now it's finally paying off. They're letting Evan Bouchard, get big minutes, and getting a guy like Chris Knobloch, who was with the Rangers AHL team in Hartford, who was, Connor McDavid's agent back, in previous years, and or not agent, like junior coach, and just making big moves like that. And getting Woodcroft. Yeah, that's gutsy. You're in the Stanley Cup and you fire your coach and bring in the guy from the AHL. That they just they're capitalizing on in the moment, and they weren't afraid to make those big moves. And they got a guy in Corey Perry. It was really controversial. I mentioned Evander Kane, but I wanted to say Corey Perry too. But I mean, the guy's, this is his, he's the first person in NHL history to be in a Stanley Cup with 5 different teams. I mean, I put that tweet out there. If you want to be in the Stanley Cup, you call up Pat Maroon or Corey Perry recently. And it's a good chance you'll be one of the 2 teams in there. And so, yeah, they they made controversial moves, but it worked for them. And at one point they were losing to the San Jose Sharks. Isn't that crazy to think about?
Yeah, that was the nail in the coffin.
And then look where they are. They've taken down some really good teams. Took down Dallas, who everybody thought was going to run away with it against Edmonton, and They persevered. A guy like Stuart Skinner too was, awful at some points in the series, but he outplayed Jake Ottinger. Just think of that. He outplayed Jake Ottinger. So credit to Stuart Skinner. Credit to Darnell Nurse too. He was getting a lot of heat and he played phenomenal later in the series. So, they fight through adversity. They're the opposite of the Wild right now. They don't let the refs get in their heads. They don't worry. They don't panic because they know they have Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, and those guys deliver. And the Wild players, they need to show up in the playoffs. They need to get back in the playoffs, but they need to show up. And it's easier said than done for sure.
Well, we'll keep an eye on how this assistant coach search goes, but it's not off to a great start.
Always something.
Yeah, it is always something. So that's going to do it for today's episode. As always, make sure to keep an eye out for new episodes of Locked On Wilds coming to you every single day of the week. And if we do have any breaking news, of course, we will have you covered. So make sure to follow along on your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Locked On Wild has new episodes for you every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.